Buongiorno. This week, Duolingo and Google both announced some really interesting AI powered features for language learning, and I just wanted to take a minute to go through the news with you and tell you a little bit about my perspective as a language tutor. Now, if you're watching this, you're very likely a language learner, and so am I. I've been learning Russian on Duolingo for I think 135 days, something like that. And yeah, but I wanted to give you, both my perspectives that I can offer and just tell you about some of the news. So let's dive in and have a look. So the main one here about Duolingo was that they launched 148 courses created with AI after sharing plans to replace contractors with AI. So I think this is quite a good move by Duolingo. They've obviously got the structure of the courses, of the characters, of the different templates, and all they kind of need to do is just populate those out with lots of different languages. So I think this makes sense for them. The plans to replace contractors, I think again, there's so much that AI can do in terms of heavy lifting that you might only need less contractors to look at the more advanced levels of the courses. It's very likely that your AI models today can just generate a lot of the basic stuff, which you will have seen on this channel. I've talked before about how to use AI to generate homework for yourself, and on that kind of beginner stuff, it's pretty much spot on. Of course, you need a human eye to just verify and check everything. And when it comes to the really advanced stuff like I don't know, local phrases or something that only a true Italian teacher or professor or local would know, then that makes more sense. But again, you just don't need that many people. So let's have a look. So they introduced 148 new courses, announced on Wednesday, had a little bit of backlash. But here, this is quite important. So they double their course offerings. Think how long it would take Duolingo to do this, manually or with humans, versus they're able to roll this out in a lot shorter time frame. And exactly as Lewis Van Aan says, their CEO, developing their first 100 courses took about 12 years, and now they've been able to launch nearly 150 new courses. So I think for learners, it will be good. And I think there's a whole debate here about will society benefit more than the language contractors who are working with Duolingo will suffer? And I think the answer is probably yes, but we'll see. Because I guess you can say that with any kind of tech job. Will society benefit more than the employees of that company will suffer? Maybe on a per company level, yes, but on a whole, maybe no. Um, so and then this point, so the CEO told the teams they'd gradually stop using headcount to do work, and he wrote that headcount will only be given if a team cannot automate more of their work. Automate. Um, we've seen this a couple of times recently in the news. So here is another article about the CEOs of Shopify and Fiverr, who basically said the same thing. So before asking for more headcount and resources, in fact, let me zoom in a little bit more on that. Teams must demonstrate why they cannot get what they want done using AI. So I don't know if any of you are familiar with the Americans' kind of visa system, in the sense that for a company to be able to allow or to issue a visa to a foreign worker, my understanding is that they need to prove that there is nobody resident in the United States at current who is able to do that job. So it might be quite similar here. So they have to demonstrate, teams will need to demonstrate that there's no one in the company who can do, or no one, no AI rather, who can do the work before getting headcount. So yeah, just kind of maybe starting to emerge as a bit more of a trend. So Shopify, Fiverr, Duolingo, they're definitely not the biggest companies in the world, but they're definitely not the smallest companies either. They're traditionally been very prestigious companies to kind of work for, and might set a bit of a precedent. So that was the first bit of news. And yeah, users have taken to social media to share their displeasure. AI is making the app worse with lower quality. I think this will probably be patched out. I mean, yes, we know that AI doesn't get everything perfect, but the amount of even just if it's somebody's full-time job, just to verify what the AI says, they could have maybe one or two speakers or professors in a language, per language, to just sit there all day and just verify what the AI says, rather than having to come up with that from scratch. So I think the quality will improve. It's like myself, when I make my homeworks for Italian using ChatGPT, of course there are some inaccuracies, but it's relatively straightforward for me to go in and just fix the mistakes or reword the prompt slightly or this kind of thing to get that perfect result. So that's the first bit of news, and I couldn't see this yet on my Duolingo. I'll put a little video on screen of what my app looks like at the moment. I definitely couldn't see 148 new courses, but keep in mind I'm based in the UK. Maybe this is a US rollout. Maybe it was just a press release, um, and it hasn't come out yet. This final section, the new language courses are primarily designed to support beginner levels. So this is kind of what I was saying with a lot of the news about AI and language learning. It does get the beginner stuff right a lot of the time. Of course, the really advanced stuff, you still want that human oversight to have a look. But for the beginner stuff, that's totally fine. Stories develop reading comprehension. Again, I think this is a great move. They've got that Duolingo structure and that template. They've got the characters. They've got the app. All they need to do is just populate it with AI generated, human reviewed stuff, and they can increase their offering to students easily. The great thing about Duolingo as well is they have a lot of expertise on learning, on how people actually learn. So they can weave that in. And Duo Radio, which helps with listening comprehension, plans to launch more advanced content. I think this is fantastic. Any language learning course should include, maybe some fun exercises, some reading, some listening. So this all sounds good. Okay, moving on to Google's news. Google launches AI tools for practicing languages through personalized lessons. So there's kind of been this consensus in the tech world, at least in the last couple of years, that Google's been maybe slightly behind on some of their AI products. We remember when I'll try and find it when they launched a version of their image generation software that was deemed woke or correct for modifying some historical pictures. I think if someone tried to generate a picture of an old president, they would come out all sorts of different ethnicities. This kind of thing. Typically, I think they've scored okay on the benchmarks with the different models. But what Google do have more than anybody else is the distribution. There are billions of Android users out there, billions of people logging into Google every day. If we search anything on Google today, um, how to make a vanilla sponge, okay, whatever. The first thing that we will see. Oh, it's interesting that didn't actually come up that time. The AI overview. If we said like I don't know, just anything. Yeah, here we go. So the first thing that we'll see is this AI overview section. And, there's currently no way to turn that off. You have to remember that Google just has the reach. Billions and billions of searches happen every single day. So when it comes to Google's kind of suite of things, they're able to roll them out to much more wide audiences. You have to remember that, just because a technology exists or is good, it doesn't mean that people will flock to it. ChatGPT obviously had, I think, the record for the newest or the highest amount of new user signups in a short space. If I remember, beating out Instagram. Um, but there's still billions of people who don't know what ChatGPT is or are intimidated by it. Versus Google, weave that in very naturally, kind of how Apple, I think will do as well. But anyway, the whole point with this is their existing models are good, but they just need to be rolled into many of their apps, which they can do. So, for example, they're releasing some new AI experiments help people to learn a language in a more natural way. They're looking to take on Duolingo, perhaps. The first experiment helps you to learn specific phrases, and the second helps you sound more like a local. Both of this is very easy to do with ChatGPT at the moment. It's just, again, ChatGPT is very much a text-based UI. They do have some pictures, versus Google can kind of make it pretty and make it easy, for example, similar to how Duolingo does. So, Google notes that one of the most frustrating parts of learning a new language is when you find yourself in a situation where you need a specific phrase that you haven't learned yet. Yes, typically at the moment we might just check on Google Translate or just try and, butcher our way through. With the new Tiny lesson, you can describe a situation and you can get suggestions. Again, you can kind of already do that with a language book or with ChatGPT, but I guess this just makes it easier. Yeah, and it's about just making this stuff easier, which I think that Google can do because they have so many ways to integrate this across any device. The next experiment, Slanghang, wants to help people sound less like a textbook when speaking a new language. Okay, you have to learn to speak formally. Yes. So again, this is kind of typically this is a little bit more relegated to the human realm than the AI realm, in the sense that there's a lot of language that isn't written down. If we think about slang, even in British English, we have different accents and different things that people might say in the north of England to the south, etc. So typically that knowledge is stored in human brains, but so it's going to be really interesting to see how AI can adapt to this, and especially with like if there are some really specific local phrases, um, just to see whether they'll make their way in. Like for example, Italy. Italy is much more fragmented linguistically than a country like the UK or let's say England. The England itself obviously has been a country for about 1,000 years. Italy has been a country for about the past 200. So there's still a lot of much more regional variation in how Italian is spoken compared to British English in England. Specifically, I'm mentioning England rather than the UK. Um, so it's going to be interesting to see how much of this can actually make it into this slang hang and how much is going to be relegated to humans. So that's interesting. Yeah, misuse of slang. This next one is a bit more interesting. So, WordCam lets you snap a photo of your surroundings and Gemini will detect objects and label them in the language you're learning. So, again, this is really where that kind of existing technology with AI plus the Google distribution will come in. So, ChatGPT introduced the image kind of recognition feature and optical scanning and this kind of stuff a long time ago. But this, just this small stuff of let's wait for this animation to come back. Labeling it with these little pop-up bubbles and this kind of thing. It's just a bit more natural. You can easily take a photo of this and ask ChatGPT or Gemini now to tell you what those are. But yeah, this just makes it a bit more natural. We think about this maybe potentially in a few years in combination with the Meta glasses. Um, where you're able to maybe look at just anything in life and it will just give you the translations, if you set that option. So that could be really interesting. Um, cool, let's have a look. So yeah, adjacent words, you might know the word for window, but not blinds, and currently supporting these things. So let me know what you guys think. So both on the Duolingo news, how would you feel about these changes? Can you see the new courses coming up? Really interested. So leave a comment if you have an opinion, and thanks so much for stopping by.